domestic matters first. So you should have all been alerted in advance that it is our intention to record this hustings so that we can share it on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and also send the link directly to all specialist support services so that your voice is heard right in the heart of survivor support services at a time that works for them, because we're really conscious that for you all doing campaigning, but also for our members providing life-saving support, they're not all able to drop everything at exactly the same time. So if you could all just give me a thumbs up to confirm that you're good with the recording. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay. I don't think I have any other domestic matters to raise. So that's all the things. Thank you. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for coming. Delighted to see Emma Walls from Labour, Sam Bennett from the Liberal Democrats, George Carroll from Conservative, and Dennis Clark from Plaid Cymru. Delighted to have you all with us this afternoon. We have a number of questions which have been sent through to us from both our specialist support member services, but also from our survivor engagement network, which we'd like to ask you in a few minutes. But to start with, I was wondering if I could give each of you in turn an opportunity to say something, to introduce yourself and sort of set out your vision. So I'm just going to give each of you 5 minutes, if that's all right. And I'm going to try and go in alphabetical order. So I'm going to start with Dennis, if that's okay.
Dennis, you're on mute.
Oh, it came off and then went on again, Dennis. The joy of tech.
Right, there we go. Okay.
Perfect.
Where all systems go at last. Right, as I only have 5 minutes, I'm known for being able to go on at length, so I've made some notes to just make sure I keep to my 5 minutes or thereabouts. Right, so this is obviously an important topic for all of us commissioners or proposed commissioners. I'm Dennis, as you know, and I'm the Plaid Cymru candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner for South Wales. I'm a lawyer. I've worked as a legal aid lawyer for about 50 years, and when you analyse what I've been doing, you may agree with me that I've been practising for this role for all that time. I've got the necessary ammunition to do the job. The sort of work I've been involved in includes criminal defence work, family law, especially in relation to claims of abuse, civil law, especially where my clients are having to either defend themselves from one authority or another or need to take proceedings in order to safeguard their rights. I've been involved over long periods with trying to improve the criminal justice system. I've been seconded by local judges into helping with issues in family law, especially where there are crossovers with other branches of the law. I was appointed chair of Kent, Surrey and Sussex Courts Board by the Lord Chancellor, but when Mr. Grayling took over that role of Lord Chancellor in 2010, one of the first things he attempted to do was to abolish the courts boards. I believe mine was the only one to prevent this, and it took Mr. Grayling about 3 years to get rid of me. Throughout my career, I've been helping ordinary people whose fight was against authorities that have bottomless resources to push their agenda. I'm used to negotiating with the people who matter. I'm used to having to sue them in order to get the right result. I'm interested in the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner here in South Wales because I'm a firm believer that the role needs something other than a political background. My career was built on not making decisions for political reasons, and I'd much prefer to continue in that way so that I'm not prevented from speaking out against anybody who's causing the problems, whether at government level or lower. I was happy to proceed with the application under Plaid Cymru in the certain knowledge that Plaid's policy is that this role should not be political. I hope to prove that Plaid Cymru is right by being voted in and sorting things out. I'm sure others following will want to state the same thing. We want more officers in South Wales Police Force, which is what my Plaid colleague in Dyfed Powys has managed during his tenure. Players' law should work quickly and effectively, and people must know about it. I'll want to make sure that additional funding is available for independent domestic violence advocacy and for independent sexual violence advisors, as well as exploring opportunities to fund perpetrator schemes, those which aren't included in mainstream funding. The independence of those roles is important and is a pointer towards the PCC needing no allegiance to any of the authorities that need to be part of the PCC's oversight. The Police and Crime Commissioners should ensure that the police use all of the tools available to them to step in and use the law to avoid any expected offending. Full use should be made in due course of the Domestic Abuse Protection Notice and the Domestic Abuse Protection Orders. I see that the draft, however, the draft guidance notes are about 80 pages, so it's going to be important to analyse the law and guidance to ensure these are implemented, if at all, for maximum benefit. As always, the law is changing, and in changing, creating confusion. An important issue for me is the time it's taken to investigate, decide on charge, bring the case to court, and conclude it. There's no reason for this. What I used to be able to do to protect clients subjected to abuse of any sort bears no resemblance to what is available now. We can't go on blaming COVID when the issue was being built up in the years preceding COVID. On a separate tack, as a lawyer, I've been able to point out to the authorities where I believe they are at fault or have misunderstood relevant law. We need to be able to find ways in which the system is not working in order to know what needs sorting. The Police and Crime Commissioner would be a new and better platform to sort these types of issues. For example, you'll be aware that the Labour government introduced a law to prevent unnecessary cross-examination of complainants dealing with sexual history. I brought to the attention of the authorities that there was a lacuna in the arrangements so that in certain circumstances, this couldn't be stopped by the law. After a brief argument, the authorities accepted I was right, but they haven't done anything about it yet. Another issue.
Thank you.
Is my 5 minutes up?
That's your 5 minutes up, and you left it at that perfect note. So I am going to stop you there, Dennis, rather than launch into the next one. I hope that you'll have opportunity to say some more.
I did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand over to Emma. Emma, if you would like to give us your 5 minutes of setting out your case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. I'm Emma Walls, and I'm the Labour and Cooperative candidate for South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner. So as with Dennis, I've made a few notes just so that I can keep contained to my 5. So gender-based violence and abuse, in my view, is a crisis, and statistics and, more importantly, the stories of victims and survivors continue to tell a very shocking and unacceptable story. It's the right of all women and girls, is my belief, to be safe and feel safe in their homes, in school, in workplace, online and on our streets, and to have trust and confidence in those with a duty to prevent, protect and support them when in need. I've got first-hand experience, both professionally and personally, and understand the complex, long-lasting and devastating impact of gender-based violence. Firstly, having worked 23 years in the criminal justice system, as a probation practitioner working frontline in communities and homes with victims, survivors and perpetrators of domestic abuse and sexual violence, and later going on to senior roles where I've developed policy, strategy and designed and commissioned services. And more recently, a more personal impact on me, having lost a family member in circumstances that may have been prevented if as a society we were better equipped to identify the signs of abuse and violence. So that's why ending all forms of violence against women and girls has and will continue to be a priority for me. And as the current Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for South Wales, I've been at the forefront, along with many of you, I'm sure, on this call, at driving change and improvement in the response to gender-based violence across policing and justice in collaboration with many organisations. To name but a few examples, I've led on South Wales' strategy for tackling VAWDA SV, putting victims and survivors centrally in shaping priorities and solutions, building a whole system response, making sure that we're investing adequately in victim services, providing advocacy, support and training for professionals, and importantly, investing in perpetrator services and interventions. And more recently, as the chair of the local criminal justice board, starting early to implement the Victims Code of Practice. I've stood up Policing in Wales Vowdr SV Task Force to make sure there's scrutiny and accountability for policing, and recently introduced a police perpetrated abuse domestic violence service, and a number of reform programmes around the Vowdr SV Blueprint, the Women's Justice Blueprint, and anti-racism, all aimed at ensuring that we drive a whole system response to improving services for victims and survivors, and particularly those from marginalised communities. So going forward as your Police and Crime Commissioner candidate, I'm committing to making sure that development and implementation of the whole system and public health approach is championed and continued, and make sure that we work with specialist sector and grassroots organisations to amplify voices of victims and survivors, particularly in holding policing to account. We embed a prevention first culture, recognising we need to change structural inequality and focus our efforts on children and young people so that those pervasive intergenerational attitudes do not continue. Delivering justice is important in investing in specialised support for victims and survivors, supporting specialised rape and domestic abuse courts, and working with family courts so that we do not re-victimise or allow family court processes to be weaponised for victims and survivors. And lastly, ensuring that we have a proactive perpetrator strategy. And lastly, just to say there are a number of forms of violence against women and girls that are increasing, and that I want to ensure policing and criminal justice are adequately equipped to support victims of stalking and harassment, make sure that we tackle misogynistic hate that's proliferating online, and that we have got adequate responses to more marginalised communities through culturally competent services. So as your Labour and Cooperative Commissioner, I'll continue to work with Welsh Government and partners for the ambition of ensuring that Wales is the safest place for women and girls. And with the UK Labour's mission to halve the level of violence against women and girls within a decade, the UK Labour government going forward will ensure we have the necessary environment to redouble our efforts to make the progress that we all need to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much. George, I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me first of all?
I can hear you perfectly. Thank you for checking.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here, first of all. I'm George Carroll. I am the Welsh Conservative candidate for South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner. Violence against women and girls is a major threat. It's serious, and as such, it needs to be taken seriously. There are obviously a variety of different things that need to be done to make sure that that happens. But the most important thing for me that must be done to address it is to deliver more police, both more police on our streets so that women and girls feel safe and threats to them and their safety are eliminated, and also so that there are more police to investigate crimes that happen and put those responsible to justice. I think that as Police and Crime Commissioner, I will be well equipped to delivering this by managing the force's budget as efficiently as possible, ensuring that all resources go on core policing and frontline services, ensuring that the force makes full use of all police recruitment grants, and also ensuring that police recruitment targets aren't just met, but exceeded. It's important to ensure that women and girls have access to safe spaces. That means ensuring that single-sex spaces are made available and promoted. And as Police and Crime Commissioner, that will be one of my priorities. I will also ensure that the biological sex of suspects is recorded accurately, and that any press statements and communications made by the force accurately reflect the biological sex of suspects. I think it's important that the police are adequately resourced to ensure that all offences are properly investigated, to ensure that teams have the necessary resource in place to make sure that that happens. I think that, as other candidates have said, we need to ensure that early intervention takes place. When we look at offences like stalking, it's important that they are nipped in the bud early. It means that when offences are reported, the police take them seriously and that the necessary action is taken to prevent perpetrators from being able to get to continue having access to victims and allowing those situations to escalate. We've all seen what happens if that doesn't occur, and that's why it's important that the police are resourced to ensure that that takes place. I look forward to taking part in the remainder of this hustings and answering your questions. I think that that's probably the best time for me to address the points raised, as I can be specific and ensure that I engage with the questions that are put to me. So I'll end by once again thanking you all for inviting me here this evening, and I look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but by no means least, Sam, I'm going to hand over to you.
Fab, thank you very much. When you said we're going to be doing it alphabetically, I was like, oh gosh, there's always a bad bit where you've got to be Bennett as your surname. But here I am last, so I wasn't expecting that. Not used to that either. Thank you very much for inviting me to the hustings. My name's Sam Bennett. I'm a councillor in Swansea. I represent the docks area, or the old docks area of Swansea. And so for me, this campaign and my priorities as Police and Crime Commissioner would be about our communities, putting communities at the heart of everything that we do and making sure that we're listening to what they've got to say, whether that is a physical community like an area, or looking at sort of interest groups of communities, whether that's women and girls, or the BAME community, or others. It's about, for me, it's about how we engage with our communities, make sure our communities are heard by the police, and that ensuring that we are responding to their needs and their requirements. So that, to me, is a key pillar of not only of my approach, but my campaign, but also how I think that we should be working to restore trust and faith in the police with our communities. Everything we need to do needs to be aimed at making people feel safe, and particularly making women feel safe. When I worked previously within a medical school, I was on the Athena Swan committee, where we were looking at promotion of women, which I know is not what we're necessarily talking about, but one of the key things that really stuck with me was a professor who turned around to us and said, what matters about equality in this area is that when things work for women in the workplace, they work for everybody in the workplace, and that's true and translatable to policing as well. When women feel safe and feel heard and feel responded to in our communities, everyone will feel safe and responded to and heard within our communities. So for me, that's a key part of reducing crime and violence against women and girls. And I think that remains like horrifically high in our society, with one in four women experiencing that in their lifetime. I was recently on an antisocial behaviour scrutiny inquiry at Swansea Council. And we're looking at how we can reduce ASB. It's a particular issue in the ward that I represent here in Swansea. And it became very clear that a interagency approach to dealing with antisocial behaviour and crime was really key and important. But what we've seen is over in that reporting, what was quite startling to me was we saw all sorts of crime drop in the Neath and Swansea area that was reporting to this that scrutiny inquiry. But for sexual offences, stalking, harassment, they were two categories that you saw an increase in offences, and that has got to be something that we've got to really focus on. Is that sexual offences, stalking, and harassment are dealt with and to make people, as I said at the top of this, feel safe within the community. And a wider part of that is that sort of public trust. We saw recently a report about a photographer being arrested at Sketty police station for taking photographs of an incident, and then you've seen the riots in 2021 in Swansea in the Mayhill area, and in 2022 around Ely. Not all related none of them relating to women and girls. But what they do highlight is that when you're seeing these negative stories in the news, it's highlighting that maybe the police are not doing the best job that they could be for our communities, and therefore making people feel safe within the communities that the police and politicians, whether councillors or police and crime commissioners, to be seeking to serve. In sort of doing some research for this hustings, I came across quite a startling figure that South Wales Police, whilst the largest force, has 63% of all allegations against police officers for violence against women and girls. Again, if we're going to restore faith and trust in our communities and women and girls in our police, we have to put at the front and centre a zero tolerance. And I would want to see a cultural review of our police force, you know, accepting other reviews that have happened, but looking into our own police force, exactly what's going on and how we root that out. And something that I've been very supportive of as a member of the Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service Authority, where they've been doing launching cultural reviews there as well. So to summarise, as a PCC, I want to lead a service that is trauma informed, rebuilds trust, is community focused and responds to the local needs, working in partnership with expert services and charities like yourselves, all the way through to councils and the health service. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Perfect timing, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm getting some further messages coming in of additional questions, but I am going to ask each of you, and I'm going to do this by a show of hands. So rather than continue to go with alphabetical order, I would hope that you would be able to respond to each other as well. So my first question is, what would be the first thing that you would like to achieve if elected in relation to violence against women and girls? How would you see that very first thing happening? And I don't know who would like to go first before I drop someone on the spot. Emma. Oh, you see, you all went at once. I'm going to go Emma and then Dennis and then George. Emma.
So as many of you will know that one of the first responsibilities of the Police and Crime Commissioner is to set the strategic direction. And one of the first things I would like to do is to set out a new and refreshed Vawdr SV strategy for South Wales, engaging and co-producing the strategy and actions with victims and survivors of all forms of domestic violence and abuse, and ensuring that we align other related policies and strategies so that we are taking a fully intersectional approach in the way that we work. As I've already said, I'm very committed to making sure that not only are we doing this at a strategic South Wales level, that we make sure that we are setting direction, joint planning, action and vision for localities at local level. I think it's local problem solving and grassroots organisations that where we're going to start to see and drive some of the significant changes that we need to feel. So one of the first actions I'd like to take in this area is absolutely a redoubling of setting out my vision, actions and intention in a plan that both policing, justice and local partners are very clearly able to collaborate and get behind me in order to deliver.
Thanks, Emma. I think it was neck and neck between Dennis and George. So Dennis, can I hand over to you?
Remember.
You're there.
Okay. Well, from what we've already heard, we know that there's a great deal going on already in order to try and deal with this problem in South Wales. I think that my immediate reaction, though, is to have what I would call a full audit of everything that is being done, a full audit including a complete note of everybody that's involved in sorting it out, all of the charities, all the other groups who are doing good work, but also to try to talk to the other three PCCs that we then have in Wales to make sure that we have a Wales-wide way of dealing with things to the extent that we can have it Wales-wide, because a swapping of ideas is obviously vital. But also, if it's a Wales-wide way of trying to approach this and hopefully resolve it, we save money which can then be used to add to the other resources, including other police officers. And I see that as an important way forward. I wouldn't want to upset anything at all that's already in place and that's working, but I just want to make sure that everything is working to the best extent that I believe it can, and that we may be creating more funds to add to what we're already paying into this area.
Thank you so much. George?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. As Emma said, one of the first things that the Police and Crime Commissioner must do on being elected, and this is the case whoever is successful, is set the police and crime plan, because there is a statutory deadline for that. It's not optional, so it has to be one of the first things that you do. And that's where you set the strategic priorities and direction of the force. The chief constable is measured against that, his performance is measured against that. So that's why it's such a crucial stage, it's such a crucial stage of the process. What I would make sure that happens in that police and crime plan is that there is a clear laser focus on the core priorities of the police. I think often the police, not just police forces, it happens to lots of organisations and public bodies, they sometimes get distracted from the issues that they need to be focused on, what they exist for, their core priorities. And obviously, tackling violent crime and violence against women and girls is one of the core priorities that the police exists for. They're there to keep us safe, they're there to prevent crime, and they're there to catch the perpetrators of crime. So I'd be making sure that laser-like focus on this issue is included and set out in the police and crime plan. I would be making sure that that was made clear to the chief constable, that that's what I expect to happen. And I would also, when setting the budget, obviously make sure that the sufficient resources were in place to enable the police to protect our communities and protect women and girls from the threats that violent crime presents. So that's how I'd tackle it, and it would obviously be a core priority from the start of my term of office.
Thank you so much. Sam?
Thank you again. I think for me, key priorities, I think that on sort of day one would be to see the relevant sections of the KC review that we could implement in full for South Wales Police. And I think that would be a really, not necessarily simple, but a quick and easy thing to start work on right away. Reinvesting in our PCSOs in our communities, re-establishing that link with our communities and our police. My local PCSOs do a brilliant job here in Swansea, and I think they're a key part of the face of the police force. I'd like to see us increase funding for services for victims of hate crime, and allow third-party reporting. So with the aim of expanding the provision and provide those people who are reluctant to approach the police with other options of reporting hate crime and similar. And then I think the other one, although probably a much wider Westminster issue that needs to be dealt with as well, and hopefully any upcoming UK government would deal with that, would be like online crime. But obviously no crime is really done online. They're all done, many of them are done somewhere. But I think where we can, sharing resources with other forces, sharing working practices and experiences with other forces, to pool our resources to tackle online crime as well.
Thank you so much. Several of you have talked there about pooling resources, and I think that sort of gives me a suggestion of where to go next in terms of questions. So I'd be really interested to hear, what does having a whole system approach to tackling violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence mean to you? So much is made of having a whole system approach, but I was wondering if you could give me your personal take on what does that actually mean to you if you are successful in the role as Police and Crime Commissioner. And I'm going to hand first to Sam, if that's all right. So just so that we don't get everyone in the same order.
Thank you. I think for me, pooling resources, in my experience in the council, like the Safer Swansea Partnership is a very good example of multiple agencies coming together, funded partly by the police, funded partly by Swansea Council, funded partly by Swansea Bay University Health Board, is a good example of like a whole a part of the whole of the system, if you like. So bringing together, for me, it's about bringing together multiple partners, organisations, and agencies, both sort of those that can help prevent crime, those that are involved in solving crime, but also at the other end of the at the other end of like supporting victims during the whole process of going through the court system and after the court system as well. So I think it's multi-agency. It's not just government. It's also the charities and organisations to see where we can signpost people to support, create support and services that are available, and looking at the funnel from top to bottom, if you like, as to how different organisations can be involved in spotting the signs of abuse, but also can then support people to deal with to deal with the crime, and then also afterwards get their lives back on track.
Thank you so much. George?
Yes, to me, the most important thing is different authorities and institutions talking to each other, sharing information with each other, and working together. And that's both within the police area and indeed across the whole country. It's important that everybody is on the same page, and that if there are threats in certain areas, they are shared with others so that they're alert to them and can take action to address them. It's one of the key reasons why I'm so strongly against the devolution of policing and criminal justice. I think that having one system for both England and Wales will undoubtedly make it easier for forces across the country to be able to talk to each other, use a uniform system, share information, protect our communities, and keep people safe. So that, for me, is the key priority. It's about collaborative working, and it's about making sure that people know where to go to talk, and that these institutions and authorities talk to each other.
Thank you so much. Very, very clear there. Dennis, you look like you're leaning towards your microphone. Am I correct?
Well spotted. I shall try and disguise it next time. A whole system approach to me, it means, in very simple terms, dealing with prevention, investigation and prosecution, having all of those things in mind throughout. No single one of those should take priority, it seems to me. And throughout, of course, the whole of the process of those three sections, making sure that protections are maintained for victims and for survivors as well, of course, and respecting throughout the needs of the survivors, whose needs will be, they're likely to be many and different, of course, for different people. And those needs need to be addressed throughout the whole process, otherwise the process fails. But their needs continue beyond the end of the proceedings, if there are any. And I think we just need to understand all that. For me as well, I think I've already mentioned, speeding up the whole process is important, because apart from prevention, which should be, of course, long-term, investigation and prosecution, we're letting the survivors down if we don't deal with those quickly. And I can tell you from my own experience, and I've been doing the job for so long, I've seen how it works in, dare I say, the olden days when it did work. Someone could walk into my office and 10 minutes later, I've got them in front of a judge and there's injunctions in place. We've lost that need for speed, and it ought to be reintroduced. And can I also mention, because again, it's absolutely clear from my own experience, whenever there's a Justice Committee formed at the Ministry of Justice, every single time I've been the person to say, where is the Welsh interest in this committee? Never happens. which is why I'm actually quite keen that we're allowed to do what we need to do, rather than follow on from what the MOJ decides London needs. Our needs are different, and we have to understand that. I'll hand over to Emma.
Thank you. So a whole system approach to me is very much collaboration between public, private sector and non-government organisations working in collaboration for a shared vision and mission to end violence against women and girls. That whole system approach needs to be very much underpinned by evidence, and that's a public health approach to how we drive through and reduce violence. That evidence being shared between a range of partners across sectors to properly understand where threat, risk, harm and vulnerability appears, so that we can put solutions in place. Again, a whole system approach is very much to be informed by victims and survivors as experts in their own right to help shape those solutions, and their key partner along with the other organisations that I've talked about. And it's to consider a range of interventions from that very, very primary prevention space. So what can we do better to educate women and girls, men and boys in schools, down to public campaigns to drive and tackle or challenge, should I say, the pervasive attitudes that have developed over time, all the way through to better identification, safeguarding, investigation and prosecution, through to rehabilitation, reducing reoffending, and of course for victims and survivors to support and empower victims and survivors to be able to repair and move on from their lives in terms of the experiences that they've had. And that means an underpinning of very much a trauma-informed and trauma-responsive approach. So I hope that gives you an idea of what a whole system approach and model looks like from my perspective.
Thank you so much. I'm really conscious that it's always me that's doing the talking, and my team are here. So I'm just wondering if anyone from the floor has any questions. If Jen, would you like to offer a question to our candidates?
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. I've got a comment, a classic comment, and then a question. I'm just mindful that this is going to be recorded and put online, and I wouldn't want anyone to feel discouraged from seeking support. So I just wanted to reiterate that Welsh Women's Aid has trans inclusive policy. We're committed to achieving the safety and support, protection and justice for all women and girls, men and boys, and for trans people. And our transgender policy commits to supporting the realisation of rights for trans people and the delivery of trans inclusive services and support. And with that in mind, the Welsh Government's committed to the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan, the LGBTQ+ Action Plan, and has set up the Disability Rights Task Force. And we know that someone's lived experience and identity can impact the way they experience life in Wales. So with that in mind, can you tell us what you would do to ensure that policing will take an intersectional approach to supporting survivors in Wales?
Emma, thank you.
So I absolutely support and understand the priority of an intersectional approach, given that every victim and survivor's circumstances and needs are very distinct to their own situation, and that at the moment we are needing to provide better and more responsive services to a range of different groups of protected characteristics, so that they are person-centred and specific, provide person-centred and specific support. So in terms of ensuring policing, again, as I've mentioned earlier, the Police and Crime Plan very much sets the strategic direction of the force, and is what the Chief Constable will be held to account on. And within that, I will make sure that equality, diversity and inclusion is a golden thread across every priority and action that is set out in that police and crime plan. In terms of a proven track record, I am already leading very much on the criminal justice anti-racism action plan, and I'm determined as a police and crime commissioner to make sure that the commitments within that plan are delivered. Equally, as the joint lead currently for the Vawdr SV blueprint alongside Welsh Government, I'm working through an intersectional model to develop and ensure that we are looking at looking through the lens of victims and survivors from those of a range of different protected characteristics.
Thank you, Emma. That's great. Dennis, thank you so much.
That's all right. I was determined not to let you see me lean forward on this occasion. Throughout my career, I've always trained people to realise that every single case is different, and you can't have a single way of dealing with any particular type of incident. And I really believe that what we need to focus on here is education. My experience with most police officers is that what they want to do is a good job. They want good job satisfaction, and they're not going to get that if they're going to be the subject of complaints because of the mistakes that they make when dealing with different people. And I think that they would actually welcome, at least I hope they would all welcome, the education that can be given to them so that they can cope with these different situations that they're bound to be faced with. I can tell you that the times, many times, when I've actually attended interviews with police officers, I've not yet had a problem with the way that they've dealt with my clients. They probably have problems with the way they deal with me, but that's another issue. I think that if we start off from the premise that there's going to be a problem, we have an issue here, let's start from the premise they want to do the right job, and let's give them the tools to do just that. Those who fail, they're going to find themselves up in front of the chief, who's going to have to decide whether they can be saved or whether they have to go. And all police officers know that, and in my experience, again, they want to avoid it. I don't think that I would want to suggest anything beyond that at the present time, but it's going to be the monitoring that the PCC has to carry out with regard to complaints in order to see that education is working. And if it's not working, you have to change, obviously.
Thank you so much. George.
Thank you, Sarah. At risk of disagreeing with the premise of the question slightly, I firmly believe that crimes and the policing system needs to be victim focused. So that means speaking with victims, it means addressing the concerns that they've raised, and it means investigating crimes and delivering justice. That's the priority for the police. I think some of the schemes or policies that were listed in the question, personally, I'm not supportive of. I think that they have at times been divisive and counterproductive to their stated goals. That's why I don't consider myself a supporter of identity politics. I don't think that singling people out is the best way of achieving justice and the best way of achieving a coherent society and cohesive communities. So I would very much like to see the policing system and the way I would deliver policing under my tenure as Police and Crime Commissioner would be to make it victim focused, focus on the incidents that are reported, respond to them accordingly, and deliver justice for victims.
Thank you for being so clear. Sam.
Thank you. I think for me, I think as I sort of said at the top of this, it's about engaging with our communities, making sure our communities are heard and listening and ensuring that we're present. So, you know, as I said in previous answers as well, the PCSOs are in many respects across our communities the front face of our police force. So again, ensuring that they're present as well and being able to engage with our communities and improve that trust and relationship, I think, is a key part of all of this. As I previously said as well, like being able to have third-party reporting, so we're getting more reporting from different groups who don't feel potentially comfortable with going straight to the police, and improving our data on hate crime as well. So making sure that we've got accurate and good data about help crime, so we can inform our services, fund our services, and inform our strategies more appropriately and better. Relating to that, I think I'd be supportive of seeing misogyny listed as a hate crime as well, so that we've got a much better picture of crimes in the force area, and also in relation to sort of the abuse against women as well, particularly those from immigrant backgrounds, is ending the referral for the Home Office for the immigration process as well. That is naturally going to put people off reporting crimes if they're having to report to the Home Office. So there are key things that maybe not within the powers of the PCC, but the office should be using the voice to try and get those changed as well at a Westminster government level.
Thank you so much, Sam. Sorry, a slight delay there. I'd lost my mouse. That's really brilliant. Do we have another question from the floor? I'm sort of looking to my colleague Kate. Kate.
Oh, thank you, and thank you to all of the candidates who are here this evening. I think certainly through professional practice, we've seen a lot of the really positive work that the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office has done to hold the police to account in terms of approving policy and addressing discrimination in relation to VAWDA SV. And quite often these issues have come to light through examples of frontline poor practice. And I was just wondering, how are the candidates who are here today looking to improve the training that frontline officers get so that we can reduce this negative impact on victims, but also increase the skill of our workforce, and indeed a very young workforce, in terms of their service?
Oh, I'm not seeing anyone's hands. Oh, I am. Dennis. Dennis, followed by Emma.
I think we now get back to training again and how you go about it. And I like to think that we may very well have the advantage of being able to put before some of these young officers who are learning their trade, some survivors who are prepared and able to come forward to explain the impact on them of the sort of behaviour that they have to put up with. And we have to realise that not everybody has witnessed this type of behaviour, and I think that actually talking to survivors who are able to, you can't obviously persuade people to come forward, they're either able to or they're not. But if they were to come forward and chat to these officers, I think that would take us a long way forward. It's a little bit like restorative justice, isn't it? Where you get to talk to the perpetrator and explain the impact on you in anticipation that that's going to have an effect. I think apart from office-led and online-led training, I think something along those lines would work, I think, for most officers. It would have an impact. I'd like to suggest other things, but I think it's a matter, as I was saying earlier, I need to get in and do my full audit and see what already is happening before I can make up my mind where we should go. But here's my thoughts for what it's worth.
Thank you for your thoughts. Emma.
I would absolutely be committed to the continued investment in terms of professional practice and training, and again, making sure that we've engaged with specialist sector to ensure that the training that is being delivered to frontline policing and our justice partners meets a quality standard and contains the necessary information that is required to improve and maintain the competence and capability of frontline policing to deal with victims and survivors. I would absolutely support continuation of the domestic abuse matters training package, but also a range of other training that can be implemented, particularly in upskilling officers in trauma-informed practice, to be gender responsive, so understanding the specific nature and issues faced by women and girls in particular, in order to support and inform professional judgment. Victims and survivors being part of that training, experiential learning, and having the opportunity to speak to those who have been through the system is always significantly impactful. And of course, training around cultural competency. We've got a number of minority communities and marginalised groups, and there is a need to understand the distinct and specific needs and risks around VAUD RSV in those communities. So I absolutely would be advocating additional training, not only for policing though, for our wider justice partners, in that we often make decisions as multi-agencies, and so the competency level of understanding and that training needs to be system-wide.
Thank you so much. It's very hard for me not to just join in the conversation, but I am resisting and I'm conscious of time. Sam, that was a big smile, and that means it must be you that wants to answer next.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can really add much more to like what I would have said was a brilliant answer from Emma. Really, like I think it's got to be all about training the partners that we work with and ensuring that they've got the training, and then ensuring that it's readily available, up to date, and is continual. And I don't think I'm going to continue to labour the point much further than that. I think both people before had mentioned training. So
thank you so much, Sam. And George, over to you.
The most important thing with all types of training and all aspects of it is that it's kept under review, that it's kept up to date, that it responds to issues as they develop, and that it's effective for dealing with problems that may change over time as we know things happen. I mean, to give an example, online crime wouldn't have been the issue it is today 30 years ago because the technology wasn't there. So it's important that training is kept up to date, that it's under constant review, and that we make sure that it fits the needs and purposes of the main challenges facing our communities and therefore our policing of today.
Thank you so much. Right, I'm going to ask you all, and it feels really wrong to ask this question to be given a very swift response, but it also feels vitally important to ask it. Since the Domestic Abuse Act in 2021, children who have been exposed to domestic abuse are recognised as victims of domestic abuse in their own right, rather than just as witnesses. What key thing will you do to ensure that this remains at the heart of policing, but also that children get the support that they need when they are experiencing and are victims of domestic abuse? And as I say, it feels wrong to give it such a short amount of time, but I would feel wronger if I didn't give it any time. So with that in mind, anyone like to go first in terms of how you will ensure that children are kept at the heart of the support in policing? Dennis.
First of all, I think that ensuring is a big word, but it's something that we should strive to achieve. I think that you're talking about here having connections with the third sector, the groups that are already existing in order to help the survivors. They will have the tools to help the victims, the children as well. You're perfectly right to raise children, because of course I've seen it over my 50 years, and it's a serious aspect, and it can, and of course it goes on then to affect them in later life. So sorting it out for them and with them early on, absolutely vital. I think that it may not be possible for the survivor to help on that. I don't know. Some survivors will be able to help, and help even to the extent of accepting that there is an impact on the children. So I think it has to be some sort of objective involvement. And I think those who are helping the survivors just need to have some skills in order to spot whether the children have been affected. I doubt that they're always affected, but they will be affected sometime. And can I just add that on this particular point, I think it's important for us to maintain the schools officers that in South Wales are being taken away, because it's the schools that will spot the issues.
Thank you so much. Sam, because I saw that you had already tried to start.
I think I was just breathing in, but I will carry on. What I would say is I think it comes back to that whole system approach, doesn't it? It's about, you know, the services that our councils offer. So from social services and the education system that's just been mentioned, is how we can that we're ensuring that that there is somebody that we are providing services and supporting services that have got a provision for children, and that within everything that we're doing, much like we're talking with intersectionality, that a child's voice is heard in those conversations as well by appropriate people. But you know that can be fed in, both in terms of the sort of prosecution side, but also like lessons learning, you know, the continual learning of the service, but that we're at front and center when it comes to domestic violence, where the children are involved, that a child is heard within that, whether that's through the education system, through the care services, or through any other agency that wants to feed in. So that would be my short answer.
Thank you so much. George, I'm going to turn to you.
Well, domestic abuse is an incredibly cowardly act, and the victims aren't just the person who is exposed to it, who it's directed to, I should say. Anybody in the home who's exposed to it, i.e. being there while it's happening, is extremely likely to suffer very serious effects as a result of that. So obviously, the effects on children and the impacts on children must be checked as a matter of course. I would hope that happens in all cases. I'd be very concerned if it wasn't happening. I think that one other thing we need to do, and I appreciate it's very difficult and needs to be handled sensitively, is making clear to children that such behavior is neither acceptable nor normal. It's not what people should be doing. It's not ordinary. It's not something that goes on as people exposed to it, especially children, may assume, because if they believe that that's how people behave towards their partners or loved ones, it makes it more likely that in time they're going to consider that to be the norm and perhaps behave in the same way. So there has to be a clear emphasis. It needs to be done in a very sensitive way, because obviously the impacts on children will be very significant, because it's an awful thing to be subjected to. But that needs to be a big strand in the support that children are given as well.
Thank you so much. Emma, I'm so sorry to give you a very small amount of time, but I would value your comments.
So very quickly, we all know that exposure to violence is evidence-based to be a significant adversity for children, and the impact is far-reaching. For me, to maintain that focus on children and young people would be to set young people as a priority within my police and crime plan, and I'm committed actually to developing a police and crime plan for young people, so developed by and for in their own language, so that we can hear the voices of young people and how they wish for us to respond to some of these issues. I support a continuation of the Young Voices programme, which does give the opportunity to amplify the voice of children and young people in terms of feeding back to policing and to wider partners in terms of their response to issues such as violence against women and girls. And of course, in services commissioned, setting a child first approach and ensuring the principles in terms of children's rights are underpinning the services that we commission. Very much like to introduce further family interventions, as well as developing pathways or wider pathways for children and young people themselves, and that includes maintaining the offer of policing's relationships with schools, so that we have that opportunity for education, intervention, safeguarding, but also early intervention and prevention. I could go on, but I'm conscious it's 7 o'clock.
Thank you so much. I cannot tell you all how valuable this has been to me. I am absolutely certain that our members, when watching this, that the Survivor Network, when they are watching this, that this will impact on their thoughts and their voting decisions. And it was truly delightful for me to have the opportunity to chair this. Thank you so much for making our first hustings of this Police and Crime Commission around so positive, for your time, your engagement, and your really thoughtful answers. I look forward to seeing you all in the passage of time in some capacity or another. I wish you all very best of luck, and we look forward to election day. And thank you so much. If you would like a copy or a link to the recording, we will send it round to you all so that you have a copy, if that's all right. Okay, thank you all so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, apparently no, because we have to stop recording.